These rolls are richly flavored with sheep's milk. They melt in your mouth, topped with a maple walnut syrup glaze that soaks into each bun, creating a caramelized crust that makes each roll both soft on the inside but crisp on the outside. A perfect meal to start the morning each day. Hello shepherds, welcome back, and if you're new here, hello! This is where we talk all things sheepy. My name is Megan, and today we're transforming sheep power into a soft, fluffy, and filling dessert. So to start, we're making a Tangzhong. In a saucepan, let's add half a cup or 113 grams of milk and 3 tablespoons or 24 grams of all-purpose flour. You want to whisk it really well to remove all those flour clumps, and then we're going to pop our pan on around medium heat. We want to cook that flour flavor out, but also reduce that water content in our milk to make a paste. So I'm using skimmed sheep's milk. You can use whole milk if you want, or skimmed, cultured, or heathen. Whatever you prefer is best. So stirring often, it takes a bit of warming up for this cast iron pan. I used to make this roll recipe without this step many years ago, but after trying it out for myself, I really love how this makes the rolls. Or sometimes I make this more like a loaf-style swirl bread, but I love how it makes them stay soft and last longer out on the counter. So it should take about a few minutes before it reduces down and thickens up. Now that our paste is ready, it's still hot, so let's carefully pop it into our mixing bowl and cool it down quickly with some cold sheep's milk. I'm using 2/3 of a cup or 151 grams of milk. It's skimmed and I'm mixing it in well. You can pop it in the mixer at this point if you want, and I'll probably pop it on it in a bit, but right now let's go ahead and add in some flour. I'm adding about 2.5 cups or 300 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm stirring the flour in bit by bit, trying to mix it in pretty well with our milk base. And then we want to toss in about 1 teaspoon or 6 grams of salt. And then after that, 2 tablespoons or 25 grams of sugar that's granulated. And last, I'm using 2 teaspoons or 7 grams of yeast. And then next up, I'm going to be popping in our dough hook onto my mixer and then add in some softened sheep's butter. It's around 4 tablespoons or 57 grams. And if you want to add some extra flavor with this butter, it really helps to use cultured butter so that it not only lends those important fats, but also some of that tang too. So I'm just popping in the butter about a tablespoon at a time, and I'm scraping my bowl down to help incorporate that butter really well throughout our dough. The butter I'm using here is lightly salted, not enough to taste really salty, but if you're using a heavily salted butter, it really may help to hold on the salt in the recipe and not incorporate so much. Okay, so our dough is looking pretty sticky for my taste here, so I'm going to add in 2 more spoonfuls or an additional 1/8-ish about cup of additional all-purpose flour until our dough starts pulling away a bit from the sides of our bowl. It will absorb more flour later on in the final rollout step, so I still want my dough to be a little bit tacky. Okay, so now it's looking like it's coming together really well, and it still has that tackiness that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and cover our bowl with a plate. If you don't have a big plate, a sheet pan works pretty well, or plastic film. And then let's rest our dough for about 60 minutes or until doubled. And while our dough is rising, let's prepare our pan for our rolls and filling. I'm using a square glass pan, and we're going to flip the pan. So if you can find a pan that fits well in a larger dish, the sauce will pour out and cover the rolls later on after they're cooked. So it might be helpful to find something that where they can nestle in each other. So in a small saucepan, let's go ahead and add our 3 tablespoons or 43 grams of ghee. I'm just using sheep's ghee because I just really love how it's nutty and savory, and I think it will balance out our maple syrup really well. I'm adding about half a cup or 156 grams of maple syrup, as well as adding in a spoonful of molasses. It adds some dimension to the glaze, but if you don't like molasses or have it on hand, it's okay to skip. You can also sub some melted butter for ghee here too, and if you want to microwave this, you can. I'm just heating everything up to melt it and pour easier on the bottom of our pan. This will end up forming a sticky, gooey glaze that the rolls will float up and soak up as they're cooking. Okay, so while my syrup is heating up, I'm going to go ahead and coarsely chop my nuts. I'm using about 1 cup or 113 grams of walnuts. And once our syrup is hot and our ghee is melted, I'm going to go ahead and pour everything into our pan. Next, we're going to add our sugar. I'm using about 1 cup or 213 grams of granulated sugar. I'm trying to sprinkle it pretty evenly across the base, so then as the buns are cooking, it'll go ahead and dissolve into our buns. Also, if you want to double or substitute with a different syrup instead of granulated sugar, you can. A hot tip is that corn syrup may help prevent any crystallization that may occur later on that typically occurs with this type of syrup recipe. And then once we have our sugar on top, let's go ahead and top up with the rest of our chopped walnuts. Okay, so our pan is ready. Let's go ahead and knock out our filling and roll out our rolls. Okay, so first for the filling, I'm going to coarsely chop our raisins. If you want your raisins whole, then skip this step. It's just a preference for me to have little bits of raisins scattered throughout each of the layers. So I'm chopping up 1/4 of a cup or 45 grams of raisins. And then I'm going to mix in 3 teaspoons or 8 grams of ground cinnamon into 1/4 of a cup of or 60 grams of granulated sugar. I'm also scrambling one of our farm eggs for our egg wash on the inside. This will help our filling not only stick to our dough, but also act as a glue layer for our dough layers to seal well. Okay, so our dough is puffy and ready to roll out. So I'm going to tip out our dough onto my floured canvas and flour my rolling pin. So I want to make sure that nothing sticks to each other, including to the rolling pin, which can be a bit of a pain, no? Okay, so I generally don't roll this out to a specific size or thickness. As I'm rolling out, I like to flour readily and lightly, and then flip and rotate our dough, often making sure that it's rolling out relatively rectangular-ish. And when it's a bit too big for my space, then I usually stop and then brush the egg wash all across the points of our dough. I try to get as close to the edge as possible. Okay, so now that our dough is really well coated with our egg wash, let's sprinkle our cinnamon sugar mix across the top of our dough. And then scatter our raisins thoroughly and evenly across the top. Starting from one end to the other, we're going to want to roll our dough, making it into a cute and classic swirl. If you're making this into a loaf though, I like to tuck it into a loaf pan and tuck these ends under. But for the rolls, I'm going to fold it in half and get a feel for where to cut. My dyslexia tends to give me some problems in this area, so I'm scoring the dough roll to get a better visualization for how many rolls I'm going to end up getting. If you want to slice a more perfect roll, you can use some floss or a sharp knife. I'm going to be using a special third option, a dull blade. It's a nice reminder to sharpen my knives. I'm trying to cut the rolls evenly so they'll cook all about the same rate, and these guys are going to be thick. So, arranging them around, I'm going to settle for 3 in the top, 2 in the middle, and 3 in the bottom. I clearly want it even, but it's okay. So for this step, I'm using a wax cloth instead of a plate to trap in that moisture, but also give our rolls some space to rise up and spread out. It'll take about 60 minutes till they double, so don't forget also about halfway through our rising time, so around 30 minutes. We want to check on our rolls, see how they proof, but also preheat our oven to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius. So now that our rolls are doubled and ready to bake, let's slide our pan into the oven and cook for about 30 to 40 minutes or until golden brown. And I'm aiming for the internal temperature to be around 195 degrees Fahrenheit or 91 degrees Celsius. It's bubbling away, and also my rolls are browning a little too fast for my taste. So I'm adding some foil to the top to help keep them from browning too much before the center of our rolls cook fully. So now it's looking like a beautiful brown, and I check the temp and it's close enough to pull our pan out of the oven. And let's cool it off for about 5 minutes till we can handle it, so that we can carefully invert our rolls in our pan so that our bottom syrup cools into this crackly, syrupy glaze topping. Okay, so for the taste test, it pulls apart beautifully. The dough is made with sheep's milk, which really makes everything extra tender. It's laced with homegrown sheep butter, local maple syrup that contrasts really nicely with the astringent bite from the walnuts. There's light fruity tones of raisins interspersed, And there's this decadent, pillowy soft, cinnamony center that's really perfect as a grab and go. It's sticky and gooey, so I'm not sure, you might want to prefer to eat it with a fork instead of with your fingers. It does get everywhere. The edges are brown and they really pull apart nicely, and it's infused with the sheep ghee that brings this other level of earthy and nuttiness to each bite, but also really helps that retain that shelf stability out in the counter. One of my favorite things about this recipe is that the dough makes such a good base for a variety of loaf breads as well as sweet rolls. The filling is easy to switch up and adjust, so it's a pretty low stress pastry that really helps those days when the kids say want something fast or fun, or you just want something that's filling and nice to have around and just grab a bite. So let me know, what's your favorite snack to grab? Or leave me a cake emoji if you've made it this far. I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and really have a good start to your weekend. And if you've made it this far, an extra special thank you. I appreciate you. And until next time, stay soft, stay fluffy, and most importantly, stay true to you.